So I'm Stephen Wuensch. I am a BCBA. We're going to talk about what that is and what that means. But I'm also I have a student here at PS5. I have two boys in MS4 in the AAP program there. I live down the block, so I'm not just like sort of a random expert or something that came in. I'm somebody who has an investment into the community, and I'm here probably because I feel like I want to help in some way, and because I know that I've been in public schools a lot. I know how things kind of work, and I know how things could work better sometimes, and so that's kind of the point of my being here, is just to kind of see where our gaps are, and figure out how we can kind of make things a little bit better. What else do you want to tell you? Also, I work with the organization that I'm from is called Centered Solutions, and I have some information that you guys can take with you about that, and I have my personal information that you guys can take also. If you want to reach out to me afterwards, that's cool. But I work for an agency, so I'm not representing the school. I'm working for an agency. It's called Centered Solutions, and what we do is we provide in-home ABA services that's insurance-based. So ABA, again, like what we'll break down exactly what that is as we go along. But essentially, working with children and family, the families of children with kids on the spectrum. I said that weird, but you get what I'm saying. And primarily my cases are here in Jersey City. I think every single one of my cases are here in Jersey City. So I am very much like a part of this community. So I just want to say that from the start. I make a bunch of notes for these kinds of things, and sometimes I don't even know what I don't understand what I just said. but we'll figure it out. So the one thing I'll start by saying is that I've been a behavior analyst since 2009. I started off in a private school where it was using what's called the COBIST model, and that's Columbia University's program with centers around functional communication. And that was my early introduction. That's where I did most of my learning, and it was a great education for me. From there, I went on to do home programming, which is what I'm doing now exclusively. I also worked in residential settings and public school in a lot of in different capacities. And like I said, I kind of know how things work. And so I've met a lot of families over the years, and I've been in a lot of different situations. And I think, I hesitate to, like, behavior analysis is like it's science, and it's very number indicated. I hate to quote a number that's not accurate, but I can pretty safely say that like 100% of the families that I work with, the primary, concern centered around language and communication. That's what I hear all the time. We want our kid to be a better communicator. We want our kid to be able to express wants and needs, and talk about his day when he comes home from school and things like that. A lot of these kids, as some of you I'm sure know, have delays in language or have gaps in how they express themselves, or in some cases there's no actual vocal language there at all. So when you're thinking about autism, we're talking about autism and ABA and being an BCBA. That's one of our main issues that we deal with. So I call this, talk speaking up for that reason, partly because the communication is something that touches every single part of our lives. You really can't, it doesn't. There's nothing you could say that you do that doesn't include language in some way. And so that is a major concern. But I also wanted to call it that because I felt like I wanted to give people listening in the community the confidence and the tools to be able to speak up for themselves and to advocate for their children and to uh, just feel like you can ask for what you want and and hopefully get what you need. So the goal is to provide basic information on autism and applied behavior analysis to outline the different treatments, and we're going to go through an IEP and how that works, and to help families to identify the things that you can do to help and make a change. This doesn't make any sense, but so a BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst, and okay, if you don't mind. And we work using the principles of applied behavior analysis. And applied behavior analysis is, I guess, being a science that is very sort of data driven and research driven. There's a lot of language and there's a lot of vocabulary and all this stuff that gets really confusing very, very fast. I tell people that I'm a behaviorist. Often people are kind of like, there's this picture here. If you can see that, it's the rabbit sitting on a couch. It's like a Freud kind of thing. He's like spilling his guts about his mom or something like that. So a lot of people think that that's what I do, and I pointed it out partly because it's a little bit funny, but also because it's kind of the opposite of what we actually do as behavior analysts. While traditional kinds of therapies deal with what's on the inside, behavior analysis deals with what's on the outside. So it's really critical that it's based primarily on what we're observing, what is actually happening, what people are actually doing. And that's probably the main difference there. So behavior analyst assesses, analyzes, and develops interventions for behavior-related challenges, typically in individuals with disabilities or behavioral disorders, which all goes to say that we're identifying where there are issues, and issues mean anything that basically prevents an individual from performing the activities or participating in life fully. We identify those things, and we plan how to make those things better, right? So, two parts that are important to remember is that it's not just about changing behaviors that we don't want to see. It's also about teaching those behaviors that can replace those negative behavior or support the individual. Okay. So.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
So what kind of classes do you have to become a behavior? Is it a lot of statistics? Is it a lot of psychology?
No, it's more psychology based. So typically people will do like a master's in a related field, psychology or something like that. And then there's 2 years of coursework that are just specifically about the science of behavior. And then there's field work, and they keep kind of changing it. Again, I did this a very long time ago. But there's like 1,500 hours of field work, so you're getting hands-on kind of work, and then there's a famously difficult test. So that's how it works. And when I started, there weren't that many of us, and so applied behavior analysis as a science has been around as we know it since probably like the 60s. There obviously the roots of behaviorism start long before that, but the sort of the science is relatively new in terms of all the research, and so the actual sort of title of BCBA is something that is also relatively. So at that time, there weren't that many of us. Now they're kind of cranking them out, so you get a lot of more people out there. But we kind of need that because there's a lot to do, and we're kind of focused a little bit more on the autism side of things. The behavior analysis could work with all kinds of things. You could do like habit reversals for regular people or whatever. But when we think about being a BCBA, and thinking about applied behavior analysis, we often think about those kinds of specific teaching styles that we associate with ABA, where there's just running discrete trials or positive reinforcement and things like that. So we're a little bit more autism focused, and it is Autism Acceptance. It's the last day of Autism Acceptance Month, so that's probably why we're here. Core deficits of autism. Again, like a BCBA is going to go in and teach kind of whatever skills are necessary to make an individual function better. And the primary kind of deficits that we're looking at are areas of communication, socialization, and behavior. And everything kind of revolves around that. There's a lot more to do, but that's sort of where we're at. And behavior analysts use the principles of applied behavior analysis, like I said there. So ABA, applied behavior analysis, that's a big one that you hear all the time. A science, and again, I'm just going to read this. A science and therapy approach that helps people learn through systematic interventions based on principles of learning and behavior modification. So again, you have the learning piece and the behavior modification piece. So those things kind of work together. It's not just about stopping unwanted behaviors. ABA is also this like very large, kind of complicated, system of things, and you could go down a major rabbit hole there. But you can kind of boil it down in a way to a couple of simple ideas. One being observation is really important, and that measurement is really important. So this is kind of really, it's like you can do things that look like ABA, but if you don't have those two pieces, like you're really not practicing applied behavior analysis, you're doing something else. And a lot of people are kind of like, oh, well, ABA is this thing that is going to make my kid robotic or, something like that. Because there is a systematic piece to it. There is often things about this require a lot of repetition as a skill in order to learn it. But applied behavior analysis is kind of so broad that it doesn't really work that way. If you have the observation and the measurement piece, then you are, you're most of the way there. So basically, it's like if you can observe a behavior, you can measure it, and if you can measure it, then you can gauge how well you're doing. So you can basically you can choose to handle a situation, minimize the behavior in a number of different ways. And it doesn't really matter. If you're measuring it, you're observing it, then you're good, and you're doing it. So I kind of assume, I do meet a lot of families who are kind of like, if you get that autism diagnosis, you're, it can be like kind of, that could be a little bit of a shock to the system because don't actually have a lot of experience with it. Prevalent. My families don't have any direct experience with
always like definitely what it's autism is a neurodevelopmental disability that affects how people interact with and experience the world. Neurodevelopmental meaning it has to do with your brain and the nervous system. And autism is a spectrum, right? So There isn't one way to kind of understand what it is. It's this very broad, all from kind of like ABA. So you do have more serial behavior, lack functional language, who very nice. Who have lots of negative interfering behaviors, who require a lot of support. On the other end of that, you have kids who are communicative, but may have more social kinds of issues, and some other gaps in language, but that don't necessarily prevent them from participating in a general education classroom setting. But again, communication and socialization, those are the two big things. And often what you'll see with autism, the kind of classic, you know, way that it presents is with restrictive or repetitive behaviors. So that's like hand flapping, you can have like eye kind of gazes, you have lining objects up in a kind of ridiculous way, things like that. Other behaviors that we see, and I've seen a lot, you get physical aggression, self-injury, elopement. These are all things that kind of would fall into that behavior category. That makes sense to everybody, right? That's pretty straightforward. Okay, so I do want to make this sort of practical, and I hope it's not a little too basic for everybody here. But again, if you're like a new parent, you don't always know like what those milestones are. You don't always know, you know, exactly where you are. You don't know like what's normal and what's not, and so it can be hard to kind of flesh out. And you might sort of suspect there's an issue, but not really be sure. And so what do you do if you're in that, if you find yourself in that situation where you suspect that there's an issue? First thing you're going to do is you're going to talk to your pediatrician, and that's pretty obvious. Chances are, like, you're regularly seeing a pediatrician anyway, and chances are, if there's a real issue, they're kind of on top of it already, but sometimes not. So you want to ask those questions specifically. You want to point out, you know, like, this is the kind of thing I'm seeing. Is that an issue? Pediatrician is going to do some kind of screenings, things like that, other tests. It's going to vary, but they'll do some kind of a screening. And if it's appropriate, they're going to refer you to a specialist. Typically, that's going to be a child neurologist. It could be certain kinds of psychologists or other kinds of people, but generally it could be a neurologist. And they're going to do an assessment. Now, the thing about these assessments is that they are very hard to schedule sometimes. Sometimes you have to schedule them months in advance. So that's something to keep in mind, because I don't know if it's the demand or, and they can be very expensive too. But they also are going to give you a lot of information. They're going to give you the kind of starting place to know exactly which direction you should be going. While you're kind of waiting for that, the thing to do is you're going to contact early intervention, or you're going to contact your local school. So yeah, I'm assuming that everybody here is, your kids are maybe elementary age or something like that. That's my assumption. So up to 3 years old, you're going to be contacting early intervention. From 3 to 5, you're going to be reaching out to your local school. You're going to call them, and you're going to say, I have concerns. I have concerns about my child's development, and I would like to have my child evaluated through the school system for preschool special education services. They're going to take it from there.
Can I say something about early intervention?
Yes, please.
My son actually went through early intervention. so people on the camera could see me. My son Bruce, he went through early intervention. So we actually started the process when he was 9 months old. We saw that he wasn't doing a lot of the typical things, which was mumbling anything. He was just silent all the time. Barely any crying, no words, no mama, baba, dada, nothing. It was like 9 months old, 1 year old. Nothing was coming out of his mouth. He made gestures. He followed us with his eyes when I called his name. Sometimes he will respond, but at that point, I was very concerned if like, oh, does he have signs of autism? But you don't know as a parent whether or not it was actually signs of autism. It's only you need a professional. So I always recommend to any parent, if you have concern, just go get the free evaluation from the state. So at 9 months, we went through the process to get the free evaluation. They come to the house, they have professionals give you a very thorough report of like everything, like gross motor skills, and then even speech developmental intervention was recommended for my son, and that helped him a lot. They came to the house during COVID. They taught the parents exactly what to do at home to practice with them. And then when he was up for his reassessment a year later, they said, okay, we could add speech therapy to him. So they went to the daycare, which was at the Brunswick school, and they also came to the house. They did virtual. They were very flexible, and it was all paid by the state. Like we didn't have to pay anything out of pocket, and it was convenient. Private, and you have to go through privately, right? From what I understand with insurances, a lot of places in Jersey City, especially the Sensory Mind, wasn't there's another one in Bergen Lafayette. When I call them, they always say super bill. I'll give you a super bill. What that essentially means is they're going to give you a very big bill. You have to pay out of pocket, so it's probably going to go from your deductible. So you're going to be paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for these private sessions where you could just have gotten it free from the state. And I always tell parents, go through your insurance first because they have a contracted rate with your insurance. So currently Bruce goes through speech therapy with a private SLP in Fort Lee. We only pay $70 for a half an hour session. That's through health insurance. I guess that's going through my deductible. But if I went to Sensory Minds, they were quoting me for half an hour at his age, because they go by different ages too. 45 minutes is for the older kids. They were charging me $350 for half an hour. So I tell parents, do your research because you want to help your child. I mean, I can't afford $350 for half an hour. I don't even get paid $350 for half an hour of my work at work. How can I afford this? And you're going to have to keep going every single week, because if you don't go every single week, they do regress. And I've seen it, especially if your child has autism. They not only need speech, they may also need OT, they may also need ABA, they need social therapy. There are so many other things that you may need. And I always tell parents, go through what you could get for free first before you start, paying for all these private sessions out of pocket, because it's going to add up, because it's lifelong. It really is. Like Bruce started when he was 1 year old. He got approved with early intervention, started therapy at 1 year old, and he's still, going through speech right now. And once he transitions out of early intervention at 3, you do get an evaluation from the child study team at the school setting. And Bruce did that, but he didn't qualify. You can always appeal. And that's what we're doing right now. Pre-K3, he didn't qualify. Pre-K4, we're doing the appeal again, because I feel like he does have some issues especially with articulation. And it's a process. I'm trying to get, him to get therapy free from the school, to get any help he can. And then we also, going through private, but economically what makes sense for our family, and I understand, our school, there's a lot of, different socioeconomic status. So definitely I advise parents, go through the free routes first. What's up?
Sorry, there are also free programs, especially for like speech through colleges, right? Some kids that are students that are getting their masters are also providing speech therapies through some programs through school. So like I think Q does it, I think when P does this, you guys can always go through that if you want to get your child speech therapy outside. And I think it's really
Where is it?
like through colleges, so like thinking with P certain schools that have master's programs for like speech are offering it as well for free. There might be a wait list. You would just have to call and contact.
That sounds great. That's great for
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. That's exactly the kind of thing that I want to kind of hit on, because it is very confusing, and oftentimes families really don't know what is available to them, what's out there, and it can be very confusing if you're trying to do it on your own. So, and there is this kind of process of having to make a case, like you're describing, to the school. But every child has a right to a free, appropriate public education. That's the law. So, it's just a matter of kind of agreeing on what that is, what that looks like, right? Because the school is going to have their perspective and the family's going to have their perspective, and somehow you have to kind of make that work. So free and appropriate public education is, like something that you're looking at as you kind of go through this process. But what does that look like specifically? We have a couple of different sort of classroom models that you're going to come across. I'm not actually sure what New Jersey doesn't seem to have exactly like a standardized kind of way of doing it. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but it's going to have something like what we have here. So basically you have 5 general categories. The first being a pull out and a push in scenario. So if a kid is having, and this is the least restrictive, kind of starting place. And you're talking about a kid who's going to be higher functioning if they have autism. They may have speech issues that they're being pulled out for, taken to the speech room, they do their thing and they bring them back. In some cases, they'll pull in for that also. They'll come into the classroom and they'll provide support in the classroom. But you're talking about maybe somebody who is having academic issues, reading, math, maybe speech, things like that. Next type is inclusion, or sometimes called integrated. Read this off here. Miss anything? So anyway, an inclusion classroom is going to have a general education teacher, it's going to have a special education teacher, and it's going to have a maybe another aide, like something like that, a paraprofessional in the classroom. And it's going to be composed of, usually mostly, you're going to have gen ed kids, you're going to have some of the special ed kids who are included into that class. The next kind of tier up is self-contained. So a self-contained classroom is a classroom that is exclusively targeted for certain populations. And then again, schools do this differently, where you might have, I don't know, like an autism classroom, and you might have something more like kids with oppositional or other kinds of behavioral issues like that. There's more focus on that. But those are going to be classrooms with 6 to 12 kids roughly. with a varying number of teachers depending on the school. So those three are what the public school are going to offer you, generally speaking, and there's more. I'm leaving out a lot, but that's generally what you're looking at. If you find that that's not working for you, that's something that you need something a little bit more, then there's a private school option. Private schools and residential centers. Yep.
Question. So just to specifically, my son is autistic. He will be 5 in August. He is like in a self-contained class now at PS37.
Okay.
Because we don't have one here.
Right.
But he is in a self-contained class. I want to say there's like 12 kids in the class, but he's an eloper.
Yeah.
And it was his first year at public school in Jersey City. He was in a private daycare before. He had a one-to-one BT 40 hours a week. So really shadowed him throughout the day. So when we went to the IEP meeting, when we first started, before we started in September, they basically said no to a one-to-one. And we didn't know why, but we were like, we didn't know that we honestly didn't know that we were gonna start public school until
Right.
there
Yeah.
was something that happened in the daycare. We're gonna switch him literally on day 2. And we had the IEP in place. So we really didn't question it when we had the IEP meeting in the summer.
Right.
But now we keep asking, and we have an IEP meeting coming up for the next year. And I don't know what the law says about a one-to-one specifically. What is the standard to have a one-on-one in Jersey City? Do you have to be a danger to yourself or danger to someone else? And the reason I ask that is because outside of Jersey City, any other county, I have, friends who have autistic children like Union City or the other suburbs, and their kids who are not elopers, but are also on the spectrum, their kids get a one-to-one. And I'm like, why is that? Like, what is it? What is the standard to get a one-to-one when my child is truly, if he were in his classroom, he would be off to himself, like kind of just, in a corner or like just running around, really self-directed.
Right.
Would try to leave the classroom. He really needs to, redirected throughout the day. So I can't understand what the standard is to get a one-to-one. And for him, I think it would benefit him, being that he is so self-directed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know this comes up all the time. Even when you're in school and you're in the classroom, teachers are often like, what's fun for this kid? Like,
The class has not, the teacher has not said that he needs a one-to-one
Yeah.
but and the only time that I've heard from prior years from that classroom where there was a need addressed for a one-to-one for a student was when the child was aggressive. But I'm like, is that the standard? Is that like what the standard is? You have to be aggressive to yourself or someone else? Because I'm like, for a lot of autistic kids like my son, who's in a self-contained, who will literally elope and wander around, I'm like, that. And then, and in other suburbs, the standard is he would have to get it if he was in a different district. And
Yeah.
just-
So there
what is the standard?
there isn't a standard really. That there isn't a rule about that really, and it does vary district by district, and it is the kind of thing where I guess the two kind of main considerations, and it's not really much, but it's individual needs, and unfortunately it's the availability of supports also. So sometimes it just comes down to a school staffing issue, and my experience over the last few years in public schools is that it's very hard to find people. It's actually, even if they, you could kind of go down a road of talking about budgets and spending and all this kind of stuff, and it's hard not to feel like our kids need more. But often it's like people just aren't there. They don't exist to take these jobs. Still, if you need it, you should get it. And I'm not saying that like everybody should go asking for one-to-ones. It's not always going to be appropriate. But you, again, like have to kind of make a case for it, like that's what it's going to come down to really. It's like the kids who are getting one-to-ones are going to be the ones who are physically aggressive, that are engaging in self-harm, property destruction, or danger to others, things like that. And even sometimes in those cases, you don't see kids getting one-to-ones. But it comes down to kind of making a case for yourself. So I would say that to me, elopement poses kind of a big problem. That's kind of a dangerous situation, depending on where you are. And it, I would kind of be like very clear on exactly what's happening, in the classroom. So if you have a meeting with your teacher, if you have a meeting with the child study team or the caseworker, or if you have an IEP, an annual review coming up, the kind of things you want to know are going to be, what's the plan for this really? Like, how are you defining this behavior? What are you actually seeing? What does it look like? How often is it happening? And what are you doing about it? And what is the data telling you? Because again, applied behavior analysis is, again, dependent on the observation and the measurement, and so it's very data heavy. So if they're using any form of applied behavior analysis, they need to be taking data, and so you have to be you need to know exactly what's going on in there and what it looks like, and how often it's happening and what kind of the rate it is doing. Does that make sense? Because that's going to give you a place. Like if they don't have that, that's a little bit of a problem. And you should kind of make a lot of noise about that, because it's pretty basic. If you're saying to them that I'm seeing behavioral problems, we feel like we need more, they need to at least have a plan to address it. And so that's the place that I would recommend that you start, is just figuring out those things. And then, kind of figuring out how to kind of build a case, because I don't know, it could be the case that their, behavior is specific for, the environment. And are you getting reports? Like, what's the communication like? Do they tell you?
We just had a meeting yesterday with the teacher,
Yeah.
and she was saying that obviously, and all the reports that we get, like when you do the evaluations, we have an IEP coming up. He's an eloper. He's no, sorry, that he's very self-directed. He's kind of like, he's not really engaged in a classroom setting, but classroom activities. But not he's not aggressive. But when we spoke to the teacher yesterday, she was saying in terms of like danger, like elopement. Because for us, if we're with Julius, my son, we have to like really hold him because he'll walk, and if something like catches his eye, like he loves flags, he'll like run into the street, just like dart toward the street towards it. But then when we talked to the teacher about that, she said that she hadn't noticed that. But I'm like, because he hasn't seen flag. Yes, or he hasn't seen. He has, because impulsive. It's like it's something that just takes. He could be fine, and he just sees the one thing, and he just will dart off.
Right.
So it's almost like it's a negative, even though we really like her. It's a negative to have her say anything because she has not observed the elopement when they're outside. So I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the things we'll get into a little bit is, because what I would really like to do is kind of, build a bridge, because I don't know, strengthen doesn't sound right, but really build a bridge between home and school, and behavior is contextual, so I all the time I see, there are reports from school about, it could go either way, like that there's all this stuff happening in school, tantrums, whatever, and we're not seeing it, or the opposite way. And so if they're not seeing it and they're not reporting it, they're never gonna, like you don't have much to work with,
Yeah.
and that's frustrating, particularly because it just takes one incident
Yeah.
to have a real problem,
Right.
you know, and so how do you, you know, what do you do about that? You know, like how do you kind of make that case, you know, without any data? Um, I mean, is it helpful to kind of talk through these things for everybody to hear this kind of stuff? Because I don't want to spend time on it if we feel like we're going into the weeds a little bit. But I think it's kind of helpful to talk through real world situations. You know, you can also kind of like take your own data, basically, like, which really is just a matter of like writing down situations, time, situation. It could be really helpful for yourself. And this goes for anybody that has any kinds of behavioral issues that they're seeing. If you can write down when they happen and just roughly what happens, you know, and even as a bonus, like what you did about it, you know, like how you responded to it. And that's going to help give you something, you know, otherwise, if you have some kind of other kind of outside reports or something like that that you can put together to kind of, you know, again, build that case for yourself. I'm going to share at the end. I have, I think I said this already, but I'll share with you my information, and you can reach out and we can talk through that more, and kind of I can help you figure out where kind of you want to do with that, because yeah, it's tricky, and you can kind of see from the school's perspective, you know, if it's not happening, you know, it doesn't exist really, you know, for that, and so. But you know, you know as mom that you know that feels not so great. So
Do you have a parent advocate when you go to your IEP meetings?
No.
You should get a parent advocate from the SPAN network.
Okay.
They're so much more knowledgeable about the entire process. You don't even know what you're missing until you talk.
Right.
So like I highly advise you, parent advocates, SPAN network, they're like they're volunteers, but they've been through the process so many times. They just know they're just more knowledgeable.
yeah, absolutely. If you can have somebody that can kind of you know be there for you, and that's partly you know what I want to do today is that if tonight that we you don't have to be alone, and there are resources out there, and there are people that you can talk to, and there's a community right here, and so but you don't have to show up to your IEP meeting alone. You know, you can bring somebody with you. That's okay. So and the right person can make a big difference. Let's bring it back here. Just kind of going back to the different types of classrooms, just to wrap that up quickly. It is the case sometimes where the school just is not able to fill the needs that your child has. And the kind of rule of having a free and appropriate education still applies. So they still have to provide you with what you need. And again, it's a matter of making a case for why. And an advocate can help in that situation for sure. Having your own kinds of programs at home or things like that can also help. But private schools are going to be specialized. They're going to be doing discrete trial, ABA all day long in some cases. There's a million of them out there, and it's a matter of finding the one that works best for you. But again, that's a decision that you come to in an IEP with your team at the school. That starts at the school. And then residential treatment is kind of included in there, but that's something that is most people don't really need or look at until much later on. And that's going to be the most restrictive situation that you're going to be looking at. So in order to get appropriately placed, you are going to need an IEP. It's likely the IEP is the individualized education plan or program, depending what you like. And so we can walk through how that works. We can walk through how you go about getting that set up and what kind of steps you need to take. So if you are in that situation where you're noticing something is wrong, if it's, you know, it really is better to kind of go in a little bit more, you know, strongly, from the beginning. If you're getting the services that you need at an early age, 3 to 5 years old, you're gonna have a much better outcome. And of course you can start even younger than that. So this process can really happen at any time. It generally starts with a referral for special education. So that's going to come from teacher or staff member. It can also come from you if you feel like your child is not placed in the right program, you want in a different kind of environment. You can make that referral. You can go to the school and make that request. After that happens, you're going to the school is going to evaluate the child. So they're going to have their own kinds of processes for determining, you know, what the appropriate placement is for your child. And that's going to be by reviewing the records, by looking at, you know, if you have that neurological assessment or other kinds of assessments. They're going to be looking at all those things. They're going to be observing in the classroom. They may be taking some data and then looking at different behaviors and things like that. From that, they're going to make a determination about what the appropriate placement is, if any, and making those decisions, and then scheduling the IEP. So everything happens on these very specific timelines. So the IEP is scheduled. You're going to come in for that. So you can have like kind of these meetings can sometimes be like these massive events with all these people in them. And I do think it's a good idea to sometimes bring your own person and bring somebody with you to kind of help support you. But you're going to have a classroom teacher. You're going to have you know, speech therapist, an occupational therapist if that's appropriate. Could be a behaviorist. There could be school psychologist. Yeah, the principal there. It's, you know, it kind of is. That's what the team is, and those are the people that are going to be generally working with you throughout the whole process. At the beginning, you develop the initial IEP. And we'll talk about the parts of that, what's included in that. But you do that together. So they're going to come to the table with something already kind of written up, and it's going to have their recommendations and all this stuff. But then you're going to give your own input. They're going to make changes, you know, based on what you agree on in that meeting. And again, everyone has to agree. You know, everyone's got to like be on the same page at that point and be like, okay, this is what is going to be given. This is where we're going to go. You then get to have a chance to kind of go over that, read over that. So what is here kind of like you guys have to call on kids have been in this situation or not? But it's just not going to be necessarily new. Go over it really quickly. But the IP is kind of this massive, big thing that you're going to get, and it's going to have a lot of information. It's going to have a lot of boilerplate kind of stuff in there. And it's going to have a lot of specific things also. It's going to be, it is the plan for your child's education. So it's going to have in there their present academic level, so some kind of a blurb about that. It's going to have goals that they expect to meet that year. It's going to describe how those goals are measured. It's going to outline any related services, speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, whatever it happens to be. It's going to have program modifications. It'll have a bit about inclusion. So how is your child being integrated in with the rest of the school? Do they have lunch at the same time? Do they do certain classes together? It's art or music or something like that. Is there a plan for inclusion? How are they being incorporated into the larger school environment? Individual accommodations, frequency and location and duration of the services. So, if it has speech services in there, if it has behavioral services in there, it's also going to say, okay, they have speech therapy individually one time a week for 1 hour or something like that. So it's all going to be outlined in there. So everything should be very, very clear. And then in some cases, not always, there is a behavior intervention plan that's written by a behaviorist, if there are behaviors that warrant that. I think this is really helpful to kind of just have like a bunch of questions that you want to ask. Just so you can really understand like the most important parts of what you're signing. Because it does feel a little bit like, like you can kind of gloss over a lot of this stuff. But you can ask in that IP meeting, ask specifically the type of classroom. So we went over some of those, like what does that look like? How many kids are in there? How many teachers are in there? What kind of schedule do they have? What kind of teaching strategies do they use? You want to know all those kinds of things. And it's not always going to be that obvious in the actual document. It might tell you it's a self-contained classroom, it might tell you it's an inclusion classroom. But it's really worth asking specifically what's going on in there. Like, know what the goals are also. Ask what the goals are. You're going to be giving input in that anyway. So that's going to be kind of an obvious one. But be involved in what those look like and what those are. And it's going to be academic goals. There's going to be there might be self-help skills. There's going to be language goals. It all depends on the specifics of your situation. Ask about related services, how often they're happening, when they're happening, where they take place, who's doing it. You want to know what the accommodations are. Also, accommodations being extra time on the test, or noise canceling headsets, or it could be other things too, like behavioral interventions, class-wide systems, things like that. You want to ask also if there's a BCBA involved. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. Sometimes that depends on the type of classroom. Sometimes it just depends sort of where the school is at. You also want to know how the classroom communicates with the families. It's another thing that I hear all the time. If you have a kid who is emerging, an emerging speaker, you want to be able to understand what their day looks like. You want to understand what happened during that day. And so it's helpful to ask, what does the communication look like? How does that happen? How do I know what's going on there? You want to know the schedule also, and if there's a behavior plan, you want to know the specifics of that. What's included in a behavior plan, like we kind of touched on earlier, what specifically the behavior is that they're targeting, what it looks like, how you're actually defining it, and how you're measuring it. So those are all things that you want to know when you're in there. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about one-to-one aids because that is something that comes up, and we kind of went over that a little bit. There is, the other part of that we didn't really talk about is that there is sometimes a medical reason for kids that have one-to-one aids. You're talking about a kid that might require a nurse in the class or something like that if there's a seizure disorder or some kind of feeding disorder or something that would necessitate a lot of extra help throughout the day that was not specifically tied to a disability like autism. Does anybody have any questions at this point? It's all pretty straightforward, I think. This probably feels familiar mostly.
Did you get a chance to answer the questions that I sent?
Yes, I think some of that is included here, and some of that we can touch on in the end also. Really, like the one-to-one aid thing is like the main one, and a lot of those were related to that, and so that's a kind of a big issue. But let's go on and talk about how we kind of like what else we can do and how we make that connection stronger between home and school. That's really kind of what I want to kind of get at, and I want the end result to be. It's like you should kind of be able to visualize a whole plan for your child, which is being in school for these hours, getting these kinds of services, and then receiving extra help at home, whatever that might look like. So as I explained earlier, primarily what I do now is in-home ABA therapy. So, and this is insurance-based, and I know we touched a little bit about how that works. And the one thing that I would tell you is that, like early intervention, where it's like, here's this kind of thing that's available. It's just sort of available to, whoever needs it. And that's a great thing. If your child has an autism diagnosis, you may be eligible through insurance for services at home. And it's something that's really worth exploring because oftentimes it really depends on your insurance. It depends on all the specifics. I can't tell you exactly what that looks like, but oftentimes those services are entirely covered by insurance. What that looks like is jumping around a little bit. So basically what that looks like is you have a BCBA who oversees your case, who's going to be doing the same kind of thing essentially that the school-based team is doing, determining what the kind of problem behaviors are, determining what the goals are going to be, doing the assessment, figuring out exactly what your program is going to look like at home, right? Then you have a behavior technician. We call them behavior technicians, paraprofessionals, one-to-one aid, whatever you want to call it. You have a person who's going to be in your home then working with your child one-to-one after school or on the weekends, providing those services, that are kind of just helping generally with like home stuff. Like as we said earlier, the behaviors can be different in school and at home. And the in-home ABA is going to address those things that you're seeing at home. So again, and maybe even more so in the case of the home, you're talking about addressing those core deficits of autism. And this is something that insurance companies are really looking for. There's a lot of kinds of directions that you could go in with a home program. But the insurance company generally wants to see you looking at communication, socialization, and behavior, those three things. You have situations where it's like, well, the problem behavior happens when you're doing homework or when you're engaging in everyday kinds of tasks, and those things kind of will then come into play. But generally speaking, you're looking at those core deficits. Often, the home programs are going to be looking at communication, functional communication, right? So being one of the core deficits, being that big thing that is the problem generally. And that kind of starts with basic skills. So there's things that you're always going to look for, and these are the things that often families notice first before they even know there's an issue, right? So basic skills, eye contact, responding to name, other kinds of attending behaviors like the ability to attend to a task or to stay in one spot, to be able to sit still, following simple instructions, come sit down, like that. And then the verbal behavior parts of that, which could include pointing, could include asking for things, and it gets infinitely more complex from there. So does anybody have a home program now? Is that something that anybody here is sort of has set up? So it's worth looking into. Again, especially when your kids are young, you really want to have as much help as you possibly can. What happens is it's really easy to kind of see if this is something that you're eligible for, to see if it's something that's going to work for you. Contacting the agency, they're going to look at your insurance and talk to you about your eligibility as far as that goes. The insurance company gives the okay. There's going to be an assessment that's going to be conducted by a BCBA. The assessment is going to consist of a couple different parts. There's going to be a kind of formal assessment that involves various testing and things like that. There'll be an observation. There'll be an interview with the parents, and at that initial kind of assessment phase, you're gonna, right from the start, you're gonna have goals established. You're gonna have a behavior plan established. You're gonna have everything kind of ready to go. All of that then that is put into a report and submitted to the insurance company, and we wait for the approval at that point. And the kind of what you get back depends on what you're asking for, and also what the insurance company kind of feels is the most appropriate thing for you. So you have cases, where you're getting up to 30 hours a week. It's a lot of hours of home ABA. And sometimes that's necessary. Generally, those are after school and weekend hours also. But often you'll see cases fall somewhere in the middle if it's, 15 hours per week or something like that, if you're doing a couple of hours after school every day. So the services then are put into place after the approval, and that's when you have a BCBA who's kind of walking you through the whole process, and you're going to have your behavior technician who's coming in and implementing the programs that the BCBA has kind of set up. And so that's going to go along. There's going to be a lot of data collection. The BCBA checks in weekly, generally, something like that. Attends the sessions. This is referred to as supervision, and it's meant to kind of provide feedback for the behavior technician on what they're doing and get kind of insight into what's happening with the kid and figure out the best way to move forward. So again, there's a lot of data collection. Decisions are made according to the data. And at the end of 6 months, the program is reassessed. And so you kind of have to do that whole initial process again, resubmit everything to the insurance and move on from there. So basically, your schedule then is going to be you have your school situation kind of figured out. You know what's going on in the classroom. You know you're in the appropriate place. They're in that classroom for the regular school hours. Come home. Generally, it's recommended that there's some kind of a break, and then services can kind of resume with the one-to-one through insurance. And again, could be an hour every day after school. It could be 3 hours every other day. It could be 2 hours every day. It's completely kind of up to the individual kind of situation, what the individual needs are, what the family schedule looks like, and what you guys all kind of agree with. Okay. I'm going to kind of turn it over to you guys for questions in a minute. We're a little ahead because we're not hooked up here, so I'm kind of skipping around a little bit. If there's anything I forgot, I'm happy to kind of cover. I would say the next best steps for everybody who's kind of here or listening as appropriate. Do check on those services. Do kind of get that understanding about what's going on in the classroom. We also need to think about the communication, how we're communicating, how you as a parent are communicating with the classroom, what information you're getting back from them, but then also how your home team is communicating with the school, because it's something that gets lost a lot of times and it's really valuable. I have insurance companies telling me that as a BCBA, I should be observing in the classroom. I should be attending IEP meetings, and that almost never happens. But it's something that I want to try to see change, and that's something that can come from you guys, and it's something that can come from us as well as we kind of move ahead. So, I don't think it's hard to understand that, if you're doing all this work at home and you're doing all this work at school and nobody's ever talking, that you don't really know what's happening. And there are plenty of cases where the school says, "Oh, we had no idea that he could do this and this and that," and because there isn't that communication, and so oftentimes it's things can feel a little adversarial. It feels like if things aren't progressing the way we want them to, or if there are sort of glitches or problems that come up. The tendency is to want to blame, like, oh, the parents are, they have them on the iPad all the time, or they're not, teaching this at home, or the school is not, doing what they're supposed to do. And so, I think that knee-jerk reaction is something that we have to kind of think about how we can correct kind of as a community, and figure out how to just bring that all together and integrate that better so that we're working together. Do get help if if you feel like something is off. Use your intuition, trust yourself. We brought in a couple of extra resources for you that we can kind of share maybe later. But early intervention, referrals for special education, in-home ABA, all those things are available to you, and all those things should be working together in the best possible way. And the last thing is that you have to take care of yourself also. I meet plenty of families where this can be very consuming. Taking care of an individual on a spectrum can be challenging, and it can be something that takes a lot of your energy and your time. And you really need to figure out ways, and it's probably like, kind of goes back to the community piece. People here, this is a community of people, and we can help each other and rely on each other. But you really want to make sure that you're finding time for yourself to be able to do things that you enjoy and to, think about self-care and think about, I don't know, having a meditation practice or something or whatever it is for you, but you need to think about yourself also as you move along. Yeah, we're kind of speed running this because of our tech situation. I am gonna hand out my contact information here. I didn't want to share that on the feed. But you are welcome to reach out to me with any questions after this. If we leave here and you think of something, or you think of something that you just don't want to ask and in front of everyone, that's okay too. But what are we thinking? How is it kind of coming across? Like, what's coming up for everybody?
I think it's great what you're trying to do, bridging the gap between.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very important to just have,
Yeah.
like you said, have that communication with teachers, that be very open.
Yeah.
Do this at home. What do you do in school? And
Yeah.
not just working isolated.
Yeah.
Like, oh, in school, this, but at home we do this. So it's just, I think it's very important, like you said, it's just bridging that and have real communication.
Yeah.
Like putting fingers, like let's just
Yeah.
collaborate together.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be that hard to do, right? I mean, it should be fairly easy, and it's just a matter maybe of making our voices heard and with as much kindness as possible and kind of, this is what we need and this is what we need for our kids to be successful and it's important. So it's important to make yourself heard.
I have a question.
Yes.
So let's say the school, when they do their evaluation, they only give like, let's say 5 hours a week of ABA. And you have private therapists. Can they come into the school to supplement additional hours or? they're not?
So what you're saying is that in the IEP, they've written in 5 hours of ABA, right? And can you get an outside person in? So generally, not really. The insurance won't really, like, because it's kind of like the school is supposed to be taking care of that. Insurance really isn't going to kind of add onto that. It's kind of they just won't do it. Generally speaking, I mean, you could do like a private thing always. Like there's anyone's going to kind of, be kind of help you with that, but that's going to cost a lot of money and it's not practical really. Our agency is, Board of Ed certified or whatever, so we are able to be in the schools. It's not a problem. But regular one-to-one services like that, I wish it worked that way because it would be a really nice solution. But we can have BCBAs coming and observing in the classroom also. So that's another thing to kind of push for. And that's something that, I don't know, I'm not really sure, like, what that looks like from the school's perspective. But from our perspective and from the perspective of the insurance companies, it's like, we should be doing that. We should be getting in there. So, and again, just to kind of make that connection a little bit stronger, because there are cases where, we're working on things at home, like, we want to be making sure, for example, that a kid can sit and finish a worksheet or something like that, an academic task, and it sort of falls outside of the 3 core deficits. So, but if that is attached to something like, particular behavior, then it's becomes more negotiable. And it's helpful to be like, okay, we're seeing that behavior in school and we're not seeing it at home. So what are we doing? What are we doing at home that's different from what's happening in school? And we can kind of justify different things if we know better what's happening, right? And we have specific reports, anecdotal, evidence about what we're seeing. So yeah, it's not great. It's not a great answer, really, because we can always use more help. I'm curious also if I can ask a question back. Like, what is your understanding when they say 5 hours of ABA? What is your understanding of what that means?
It's not just like ABA, it's just in therapy in general.
Yeah,
Like, let's say the school thinks that one session of like speech a week is what they deem is appropriate.
Yeah.
But I think that he needs like 2 or 3.
yeah.
But they don't want to provide the additional 2. Can I bring in a speech therapist to supplement?
Yeah, and so, right, so through insurance, the answer is no, probably not. Privately, probably, yeah, but, there's all kinds of, public schools can be funny about, like having outside people come in sometimes and, so that could take a little bit of convincing sometimes. There's liability issues and, background checks and things like that. And so, it can be a little bit tricky. I was asking partly because, sometimes the ABA, like saying ABA sort of means something to people in a specific way. And, it's like most classrooms that have an autism focus are generally going to be doing ABA all the time, because ABA is sort of structure, it's like, and the way that it works. And so let me explain how like a behavior analyst sort of sees the world, right? Is that there are 3 parts for every behavior that happens. There's the thing that kind of causes the behavior to happen. There's the behavior itself, and then there's what happens after, right? So those 3 parts govern everything that we do. Like literally everything. Like, so ideally, if you have a classroom that has an autism kind of focus, then you're using that structure all day long, right? So you might be sitting in a discrete trial, and I know I've used that term a couple of times, and just to be clear about what that is, generally speaking, a discrete trial uses those 3 parts to teach skills in a kind of generally more of a rote manner. And that's going on the principle that kids with autism often need lots of repetitions of skill in order to learn it and generalize it. So a lot of times a discrete trial is what people sort of confuse as ABA. Like that's what ABA is. It's the discrete trial. It's not. That's just one teaching method that uses in a very specific way those very basic principles of applied behavior analysis. And so, if you are on the playground or something like that, right? And you want the child to line up or whatever after, it's time to go inside, everyone has to line up, So if you're sitting in a discrete trial and you're teaching a kid to imitate you, the first part of that is gonna be something like, you're gonna say, do this, then you're gonna model it. The behavior is gonna be them copying you, clapping their hands also. And then the consequence, the follow-up of that is going to be you saying, good job, or giving them a sticker or something like that, right? And it's the exact same thing when you're on the playground or when you're in art class or you're in other parts of your day where it's like you're giving a direction, you're waiting for them to do the thing you're asking, and then you're following that up with something, I think as a behavior analyst, I would argue that there are always these behavioral contingencies happening all the time, and it's just a matter of being in control of them, right? Like who is in charge here, If you, for example, tell a kid, okay, it's time to line up. And they line up and you're like, great job. You did a good job lining up. Thank you. Let's go inside. Done. If you, that same situation where a kid is, maybe the direction causes the kid to have a tantrum or something like that instead of doing the thing that you're asking. Now, that tantrum is causing all kinds of other things to happen. Maybe, you do end up staying out longer. Maybe you do, because you don't have the control in that situation. So now there's a sort of symbiotic kind of contingency that's happening there because, the direction is then serving as a different part of that equation for the kid, and their behavior is causing you to do something different. That it's a little convoluted, but you see what I'm saying? It's like, so these conditions are happening all the time. It's just a matter of who's in charge, and so that is all to say that what we call ABA is happening all the time. It's generally happening literally all the time. But if you're in an ABA classroom, it should be happening very deliberately all the time. Like you should have systems where you are teaching during lunch and during recess and downtime, where everyone is on the same page. Everyone is trained to follow through with directions. Everyone is trained to deliver, positive reinforcement and all those kinds of things. So anyway, I just, I hear that and sometimes you're like, okay, that's confusing, and maybe it's worth sort of clearing that up. What else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have experience with kids moving from like more restrictive environments to less restrictive environments and like supports that could be put into place like as you're making that transition?
So you're talking about, well, I'm sorry, just to be clear, you're talking about a kid who's in like
moving from self-contained to
Right.
like inclusion.
Yes. So that's something that you can kind of like have in the IEP. But it's something that you really have to plan for, though, for sure. And often that's a kind of a long process. So like you don't, the last thing you want to do is just take a kid from one environment and just like put them in another and be like, okay, good luck. Because that might not work out as well. So we want to plan and we want to be teaching ahead for those kinds of switches. And so that could be, oftentimes you'll see if a child has like a preferred subject or something like that, or maybe they just like they like art, or maybe they're very good with math or whatever, then you sort of gradually are going to shape them into that situation. And that could be like going once a week, once a day into that one classroom and doing that over time and building that up. One kind of important thing about applied behavior analysis is that it takes a big sort of complex thing and it breaks it down into small parts so you can kind of tackle it slowly. And what we're really talking about here is just like shaping those constellations of behaviors that the child is going to have to do in order to kind of get by in that environment, so there's obviously there's like like if you're in a different environment, it's literally going to feel different. And if there are more kids in the classroom, might be louder. If there are less supports, that kid's going to want to know where to go for help. They're going to want to know how to access the bathroom. They're going to, there's socialization, and there's so many things. And so you really need to plan for that in advance. Is there anything specific, that you want to get into?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. We can have some stuff. You guys. Do you want to pass these around? So, basically, I'm just giving you, here's the website for the agency. If you feel like home services are something that you're interested in, you can go to the website there and get more information there. But you can also just reach out to me directly. I really sincerely I want to help. I want to like help people, figure out the best place for them to be in. And so I'm happy to kind of answer any questions that you have after this. I'm happy to kind of help steer you in the right direction, if that's something that you need. So that's basically it. I'm happy to, answer any more questions if we have more questions. Yes.
Can you send us your presentation that we didn't get to?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will, yeah. And hopefully it makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for being here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys setting this up, the PTA and everyone else. And I appreciate the school letting us come here and do this. So thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes. Yes, so
Yeah.
you could talk.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're on speaker.
Okay. So a little background. My son is 7 years old. He got diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. We did early intervention and we have in-home ABA for about 4 years now.
Okay.
We keep changing our agencies because the main experience that we have, the issue that we have with the agencies is the BTs are really unprofessional.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and then obviously, like I would talk to the BCBA about it. All the BCBAs that we have had are wonderful. It's just the BTs that they are so inexperienced. They don't know how to be professional, how to be in someone's home.
Yeah.
Because we have services after school and on the weekends. And after school in the evening time, there's a lot going on because I have other children as well. There's homework time, there's dinner time. We are tired from after work. And then they start acting like they're the guest in the house,
Yeah.
not even like a babysitter. And then
Right.
I'm like, I am doing everything, and you're supposed to be teaching something to my kid. And then when I complain about them, then it's like, oh yeah, this doesn't seem like the right fit. Let's try another BT. So, my son doesn't get that consistent therapy, and consistency is so important for him to learn.
Yeah.
And I have changed 3 agencies. I'm on my 3rd agency now, and I'm looking for the 4th, so I might come to you next. But my
Right.
question
Yep.
from you is, when you hire the BT, how do you train them, or how do you make sure that they are professional enough to, be in someone's home and do their job?
Yeah, so there are some sort of like background stuff that it's just not my role in the agency, which is nice. In terms of training, a lot of the people that I work with are people that I've been working with for a long time, and so there should be some kind of training element. And one of the things that we do is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the RBT
Yes,
certification.
I have. Hmm.
So that's something that we have our people do when possible. So it's I think it's a 40-hour kind of training situation, and that's helpful because that gives the BCBA a place to kind of start and have to kind of get into some of those training issues, because often training is happening kind of on site when it's possible, there's going to be some kind of overlap. And I try to do this as much as I possibly can get away with, is having that person with another BT, an experienced BT, and also spending time with the BCBA, so that they can kind of we can feel good about them being on their own. Things happen a lot of times, and it can be hard to predict. In the same way that the schools, have had a hard time, getting the appropriate staff. It's an issue across the board, for everybody. We tend to have less turnover at Center Solutions than other agencies, I find, and it's something as simple as how they're compensated or something like that, or the culture or something like that. So that certainly helps. I work with a lot of people who are also working towards their PCBA. So those people are very professional. They really want to be doing the best job they want to be doing, kind of above and beyond on what they're supposed to do.
Those are the best people to work with, but they leave so soon.
It does happen, yes.
Yeah.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer for it.
Because the thing is, when they're giving their services, they are home, and the BCBA is not with them at all times. BCBA is there just once a week. So they do whatever. I have had BTs who would just spend time on their phone, watch a movie on their phone, and they're getting paid for this time.
Okay. So that's crazy.
Yeah. I'm aware. And in-home therapy, it sounds like such a great idea, but honestly, it has caused so much more stress than, helped us.
I'm really sorry that you've had that experience. When I hear you talk about it, I don't even think it occurred to me, that the problem's that bad,
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to say that I haven't had staff who, didn't have issues with like lateness or,
Not showing up.
Yeah. I don't have that issue very often, but I hear about that issue all the time. And, so those things happen. And in some cases, you just can't predict it. It's unavoidable, and that's unfortunate. But you're describing something entirely different work that I don't really,
I don't know why we've had such a bad luck with BTs.
Because you really have to, the way that it works with the data is that I can see everything that's happening, from wherever I am. And so I know if data is being collected or not. So you need to have data collected every session, and you need to have behavior running and these things happening. And so part of the accountability comes from, the reports that you're getting and the data that you're getting back. And so, as a BCBA, I'm trying to be on top of those things, just so that I have a sense that things are going in the right direction. And more times than not, it's things are okay. So, I'm sorry that you've had that experience, and it's very, very frustrating. And you absolutely should change things up if you feel like that's not working, because there are a million agencies out there, and it's like, what is it worse to like be stuck with somebody who's not doing a great job, or to have the kind of disruption that is caused by having to switch? It's things to think about.
The other question I want to ask is, once the insurance approves everything, how long does it take to start services? Because my current agency took about 60 days, and we have been without a therapist for 3 months now.
It shouldn't take that long.
For your agency, how long does it take, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, I would allow 2 weeks for because your first year approved for just for the assessment, and they'll give you like, you know, a bunch of hours for the BCBA just to complete that. Generally that's going to take like 2 weeks. You know, we can cut that down a little bit if there's, especially if you have a history of having services, and there are different kinds of reports and things that we can access. After that, it is, you know, once that's submitted, so say that's, let's call that 10 days, you know, if we're really trying to get through that assessment process quickly. I generally tell people 2 weeks, and I think it's not often longer than that. But you know, sometimes it can be really fast. You know, it really depends. It's sort of up in the air once that report is handed over to insurance. But it really shouldn't. 2 weeks is you're kind of getting to the point there where it's like you shouldn't go much longer than that.
All right, that's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't expect.
That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I thank you for speaking up. I didn't expect the voice to come up.
Please share your contact information in the chat or
Yes,
something.
I'll
Yeah.
send it to you.
Thank you.
I'll send it to you. Does anyone else have any questions?
Is there an age range for ABA therapy? Like, do they age out at a certain age?
No, not really. Generally, it was 3 seemed to be sort of usually where you would start, but now it's getting younger than that, which I think is good.
What if someone is starting at an older age, like 8, 9, 10?
Yeah, that happens for sure, and that happens for a variety of reasons. But there's no, I mean, the services go like your IEP is, you know, you're eligible until you're 21 years old, so it's you're going to use that on the same guidelines, so it's kind of always an option.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's something definitely worth looking at because it's there, you know.
Do you see like at some point where therapists say, okay, this child no longer needs ABA therapy, or is it usually like something that sticks with for many, many years? Most kids have to continue with this type of therapy.
Most kids tend to continue for years, and I'm just speaking from my own experience. You know, that could be different. You know, in somebody else's, you know, whatever situation. But I, you know, I have, you know, many of my cases who have made tremendous progress. You know, doing things that you couldn't have conceived of when you started. But there's like always more work to do. You know, it's like there's always something else to do. You know, there's always things that come up, and you know, especially as you transition, you know, through the grades, and you get to like, you know, different stages in life, and then different behaviors come up, and there's kind of always something to work on, you know, and you know, whether or not services will continue from the perspective of the insurance company is a different story. There's always going to be a plan to transition, you know, away from services and to kind of move that into more of a parent training kind of thing and eventually eliminate them entirely. It's always written into the evaluation, but I haven't really come across that much. So maybe that's a knock on wood situation. I don't know, but generally there's always something to work on. There's always a case to be made for the continuation of services. Yeah.
Right, I think we have to.
Yeah, thank you. Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.